Hello, Agent. What we're seeing today is smart wearable technology, once thought to be only available to the world's most talented top-secret agents, now falling into the hands of the most common civilian. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, involves gathering intel on the history of wearables, where they come from, what concerns people have, and what the trajectory of this phenomenon is. As always, good luck. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Just kidding. No explosions this time. Just some casual contemplation. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Casual Contemplation Podcast. I'm Philip.
And I'm Casey.
Casey and I were roommates through college, and now we're long-distance friends who rarely get the chance to talk about anything at length.
So, we've created this podcast as a place where we can chat about different hobbies and interests. We're far from experts in anything, but we hope you enjoy our casual take.
As a disclaimer, all of what we talk about today are a matter of opinion and should not be taken as fact.
Okay.
So today I want to talk about wearables. I have been a part of the wearable community now since the first job I went up, which was quite a few years ago after college.
Yeah, my wearables experience probably started late. I am a late bloomer in that sense. I got my first Apple Watch, I think it was in 2017 for my birthday. That's the very first wearables that I got.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think we think about wearables today, like most commonly as smartwatches, right?
So I think I've shared in our previous episodes that I am a runner.
Run, Forrest, run!
So that's always been part of my hobbies and my interests. And then one thing that's always been very, very inspiring for me were visually impaired runners that partake in marathons, the Paralympics, all of that. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when you watch those races, what you see is the visually impaired individual and then one or two supporters on either side of the runner. Mm-hmm. And they're supposed to be the guide that helps them guide them through the course. Mm-hmm. And also in certain cases play the role of a pacer. Mm-hmm. And just the fact that even running a full marathon in itself is an achievement. But to run, 26.2 miles, not being able to kind of gauge where you are or your surroundings, that's to me is very inspirational. And I wanted to see if there are something that enable these individuals to maybe complete a course or a certain distance or even their day-to-day running on their own without the support of people guiding them through the course. So I kind of dug in and did my research to see if there was something already in existence. And actually, I guess not surprisingly, there are companies out there that are trying to create or some have even launched products into the market that support these individuals. So I kind of want to go over a company called wearworks. They're not focused just on visually impaired individuals, but they have created a product whereby it allows individuals to complete a running course. Oh. So the concept is based on the assumption that there's a closed course, similar to how you input into Google Maps. You input your course and destination into the app, and when you turn on the wearable on your wrist, it tells you which direction to go through sensors that are integrated into your smartphone. So if you go off course, it vibrates the wearable on your wrist, allowing you to know whether you're on course or not. The second component to the wearable, which was developed specifically for the marathon environment, is a sensor that captures things around you. So if something comes or somebody comes by you or something is in front of you, that also vibrates and allows the individual runner to be made aware to kind of watch out. So between those two tools, it allows the runner to complete a running course, thus allowing them to run on their own without the support of another individual guiding them through the course. Mm-hmm. Now, with that said, there are a lot of challenges that this company is still working on. Mm-hmm. One of them is it's similar to our conversation about autonomous cars. The environment in which the runner is running is always changing. There could be external factors like the weather, the rain that might diminish the sensor's sensibility. And then also the track or the road itself, there could be potholes that that could cause the runner to maybe fall. So yeah, I think it does take practice. I haven't personally tried it, and I know for.
Okay, so we have like WearWorks, Wayband, right? The idea is that it's supposed to buzz when you go off course. I'm assuming that they have different buzz types to say that you are going off course to the left or off course to the right.
Well, yeah, essentially, I mean, I would like for you to explain it with more passion than that, but yes, essentially that's it.
What?
So you could imagine those games that they had, I don't know, in the 80s where you go to the carnivals, you have to put your stick between the pipes, and then if you hit the side, it buzzes you. Yeah, it's essentially like that. So you set a course, and then when you kind of go off course, it notifies you through this vibration that's on your wearables.
That makes sense. So wearables are generally kind of any technology that you can wear. But I think if we think about wearables as a whole, or just kind of like step back and look at what a wearable is, it really is just like a piece of technology you can wear. So like your basic pedometer, like step counter, that I think they used to give people back in like the 90s or 2000s. It's like the basic form of a wearable. And if you kind of look at that, I don't know if you had this. I had this when I was really small. Pokemon came out with like their own version of a Tamagotchi, where you essentially like raise a Pikachu.
Pikachu?
And he gets really mad at you. I was really bad at keeping track of it.
That was a Tamagotchi Digimon.
Oh yeah.
Type of guy. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're getting into Pokemon versus Digimon, huh? But the Pikachu one, for example, it had like a belt strap kind of thing. The idea is that you would wear it on your jeans or your pants or something you could clip it on, and you'd start walking around. And the more you walked around, it's kind of like taking Pikachu on for a walk. So in that sense, it kind of like gamified walking for kids. But also, that's kind of like a wearable, right? It's just more or less a wearable pedometer.
Right.
So like wearables as a kind of a concept has been with us for a long time. And we've seen a lot of these in media. So Keishi, what are some instances of wearables in pop culture that you're aware of?
So I did really think about this. I know we make a lot of references to cartoons and anime on this podcast, but for me, I think it was Inspector Gadget. That little girl, Penny, she used to have a watch that would allow her to video conference or communicate with Inspector Gadget. And then as I got older and got into anime, I think a very popular, very well-known one is Ghost in the Shell, where they had full-body cybertization. Well, I guess it's kind of a mix of wearables and having technology in your body, biotechnology. And then also, I know you like this one, Phil, in Evangelion, when they get on the, I know they're not robots, but
yeah, the Evangelion.
Right. Anyways, they wear these headsets on their head to connect with, the machines or the Cheetos inside the robot. So, yeah.
So yeah, that last one, the Evangelion one, is an interesting one you bring up, because I think the idea of kind of like a full bodysuit being kind of an evolution of the wearable. So like, for example, in Ready Player One, one of the devices in that story is more or less a full bodysuit that allows you to immerse yourself within the Oasis game that the main character and all of the characters inside the movie kind of live in. And the wearable allows you to more or less feel more of kind of the game around you. And I wouldn't say I have a lot of experience with the game. I have very limited experience with game. But I can imagine that being the difference between at home playing Counter-Strike on a keyboard versus in an arcade having a gun to shoot enemies in Time Crisis. Like, it's that kind of big jump. So I think Ready Player One, for example, and Evangelion, they both gave us the idea of kind of a wearable in a full body suit. Whereas both in Ghost in the Shell and Inspector Gadget, in pop culture, like kind of growing up for me, like Power Rangers and Dick Tracy, right? Just communication devices. It's kind of interesting to see those two big branches of wearable technology. One being the communication device, and two being the increase of immersion to allow for a better kind of one-to-one experience with an external use of another item. For example, like a video game, or in Evangelion's case, like a big robot. So I guess with that said, out of all of the pop culture wearables, which one is your favorite?
One thing that I find very annoying these days with a smartphone is the fact that I need to carry that thing with me. So assuming we've done enough testing to show that it's not harming to our bodies, I am open to the concept of cybertization and putting chips in my body that may enable me to do what I do today, but it's all a chip in my skin.
What about like Neuralink status?
If you're messing with my brain, yeah, that's a little bit different.
No, that makes sense.
You know, so with every technology, there's always people who are kind of against it, hesitant to adopt new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So have you heard of any feedback, or have you seen or read anything where people are against wearables, or displaying their hesitancy towards where the industry is headed?
Actually, one thing I did want to, couldn't figure out what it was, but I did want to talk about whether or not wearables are really needed. I read an article really quickly on kind of people against wearables. Or like why someone will never need a Fitbit. Just kind of the idea that up until this point, they were fine without a wearable. And I think they hurt the consumer more than they hurt the consumer, they hurt the environment, they hurt daily life more than they actually provide benefit. You have lost the option to be disconnected, right? So I think people are definitely concerned with wearables.
I don't know. I feel like there's multiple types of people, or multiple reasons as to why these people might be against wearables. I think you just mentioned there's the eco-friendly portion and creating unnecessary technology or things that we put on our body that eventually breaks, and then all we're going to do is probably just throw them out and buy a new one. So I get that point, but I think that's kind of pressure that you can put on the companies that are building it to build something that is mindful of the earth.
Yeah, environment, right?
The environment. I'm sorry. Yeah, environment. Yeah.
With the kind of like all of these concerns of people that are against the idea of wearing wearables, both from the environmental aspect as well as from the connected aspect, where do you kind of see the ability of these manufacturers to acknowledge those and make improvements into the products that they're trying to sell? Speaking
as somebody that doesn't really know too much about this field, I do understand SDG is a key subject that's being covered by a lot of these large corporations.
And for the listeners, what does SDG stand for?
Sustainable Development Goals. So certain threshold in place to kind of not force, but encourage these major companies to be mindful of the environment, and putting in goals in place to show to the public what it is that they're doing to help out their. A key one being the carbon footprint. I do understand there's pros and cons of that, but we won't go into there. But those are the ways that we can encourage these companies to build something that is convenient, but also sustainable, right?
So I think you mentioned kind of like reusability, right? I think a lot of these devices are not recyclable. I think there's like a lot of glue that's been used. We've been seeing how difficult it is to actually recycle plastic.
Yeah.
Kind of more recently, as of the recording of this podcast.
Yeah, I think so. But I think also you did mention, I don't know if it was one of the recordings that you did, but issues with the recycling program.
Yeah.
Like where does everything go? How much of it is really recycled? And I think we touched upon with the sneaker episode, with recycling shoes, not 100% of the donate or give back is recycled. You know, with the current technology, only a certain percentage of that could be reused. I mean, there's a lot to, I guess, think through.
Yeah, definitely. I think if the goal is to improve recyclability, be environmentally minded, you want to be able to create a product that maybe 100% of it doesn't get recycled, but anything that may wear is something that can be more or less composted or whatnot, right? So there are a few companies, like watch companies, that are making a majority of the product from either like wood or bamboo, which, you know, it's probably a product that won't have as long of a life as plastic, but at the same time, a lot of the products that we have right now, they may break down, but at least with kind of like a wood, bamboo, or even a metal casing, right? That's something that if it was metal, you'd be able to recycle it. If it was bamboo or wood, you'd be able to compost it, right? So I think in terms of like maybe something that we can start pushing with the creators of these products, like Apple, like Fitbit, like Amazon, they have Echo glasses. They can start using products that are not only recyclable, maybe even compostable. Granted, you know, if you sweat in it, it's probably going to react differently. But I think
that's true.
There's ways to go about it, and I think maybe they can even kind of have that as a selling point, that if it breaks, it's really cheap to buy like a replacement module.
Yeah. Not really understanding all the mechanics, so don't hit me up about how wrong I am when I say this. But as a business model, if you look at Apple, I think they're always trying to sell more to you, right? So they disclose after a certain period of time the battery dies more quickly, right? I think one approach that we can look at this, for example, with smart watches, usually the watch itself continues to work. It's just the technology becomes outdated and the battery drain becomes quicker. So if there's a way for us to just replace those components and continue to use the framework, I think that could be one way to build something that is more sustainable. I don't know if you had mentioned this in a prior conversation, but I think you had mentioned bringing in the technology to a shop and then they fix it for you, you pick it up. I think that's kind of one way to approach it.
You hit on a good point there, just kind of like the repairability. At least for me growing up, I grew up wearing watches, and whenever a watch would die, which inevitably will, pretty much you just either go to a shop to replace the battery, or you buy a battery yourself and buy the tools to replace it yourself. So I think the idea of making the wearable like repairable to the point where you can continue using it for a long time, even though there may be upgrades. I think efforts to design in long usage, long repairability for that particular product, that makes sense.
Definitely.
I did also want to cover one of the second concerns that people have with wearables, being kind of the inability to disconnect once you do have a wearable.
Okay.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. You have like an Apple Watch. I have a Fitbit. You can like read texts. You can set it up to read emails or even call. I think the Fitbit has a subset of that. It's not quite as capable as the Apple Watch, but definitely I have a subset of items that are distracting. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on kind of the addressing of the like mental well-being from the consumer standpoint.
For a while, connectivity was an issue for me as well. I couldn't let go of my phone, always checking Instagram. But then articles started coming out. I think there was a few documentaries on Netflix about mental health versus these tech gadgets that we're kind of using on a daily basis. So since then, I've been kind of forcing myself or training myself to allocate time away from certain things. And it could be as simple as putting time limits on apps like that you happen to use a lot. With wearables, I don't know. Maybe it depends on the person, but I feel like it's a little bit easier in a sense that it's something they can physically take off. At least the wearables that are kind of in the market now. If it's a smartwatch, I can just take it off and physically distance myself away from it. I will be honest, I think it's always kind of in the back of my head because it is a source for me to get notifications when I get a call or a text. But I allocate a certain period of time, whether it be when I'm sleeping or when I just want to focus on reading a book. I take everything off and put my phone in a certain distance so I can just solely focus on what it is that I'm doing at that time. So I do understand the concerns, but I feel like there are ways for us to remove ourselves from it.
That makes sense. It's actually interesting that it is something that you probably have to train into.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, your habits, right? I'm curious if you can think of a way for companies to still sell their product, but at the same time, create the mindfulness. I know Google has like installed in their phones a well-being app. Granted, I think that's on a small few phones. I think Apple itself also has kind of like a well-being app.
Yeah, they do.
But I don't
bought a company. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that integrate within the Apple Watch at all? I can tell you right now that Fitbit doesn't really integrate well-being from the sense of kind of what you're training.
Well, I mean, I don't have the most recent version of the Apple Watch, but I don't think it does. With my smartphone, my computer, with my iPad, it has a function where it tells me every week how much time you've spent on it. I don't think they have that on the smartwatch or the Apple Watch.
I'm curious if they've more or less found a loophole with that wearable product where they can say that they're being conscious of people's well-being, but not.
I mean, there are options for you to turn off. Not well, yeah, you can even turn it off, but there are functions for you to put it on silent, so it's not always vibrating on your hand.
Yeah, but at the same time, like the well-being part of the well-being app is the ability to turn on and off timers, right? App timers, and also being like showing that like your usage for every single app that you have on, like what you're spending the most time on, how many time off and on times you on. That doesn't really track the metrics of the wearable that you have.
No, I mean, do you have issues? I mean, you don't have to disclose it, but do you have issues moving yourself away from your wearables?
I mean, I don't stop wearing my wearables, but I didn't realize how many texts I was getting in certain cases, or like notifications I was getting in certain cases. So, I mean, your wearable is your first step to checking the notifications. I've turned off pretty much all my notifications on my phone, so they'll go through here. So I check text messages, I check group messages, alarms, calendar invites, calendar notifications, and so it just kind of just like takes me away from whatever I'm doing, and all of a sudden my attention is moved away, and then I kind of am tempted to go to my phone and check out what that is, if it's bigger than just something that I can see on my phone.
I think I'm not using my smartwatch to its full potential, because most of my notifications on my smartwatch is off.
Oh, okay.
I leave it to the bare minimum. So text, call, and line, which is same as texting, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like it's all training yourself not to always constantly look at, like when I'm driving, I get a vibration on my arm, but I don't always look. But that's something that's more or less kind of like disciplined into you, right? So I think some of it goes in with like how much discipline you yourself have, right? And how many endorphins it releases when you see a notification, right? So it becomes kind of like the whole like gambling UI that Google and Apple have tried to put in, or like different apps put in, where you like swipe down when you're at the top to get new updates. Like it kind of plays into that, is what for me at least does. So it's a little bit more difficult for me to. Yeah, I mean, I have my vices, right?
Yeah.
To be honest, I get endorphins when I buy things online.
Yeah, that's a very common one.
Definitely a bad habit. So, I mean, in terms of my vices, I feel the need to check my notifications is not as high in the spectrum as it is with me being in the know of new releases, new technology, things like that. And so maybe that's the reason why. Because when it comes to feeling the need to purchase new things, I definitely have less control.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm curious about, because I think like you said, you have a lot more control over your ability to like turn off notifications and whatnot. So your watch becomes more or less kind of primarily for line or primarily for text message.
Yeah, one thing that I've kind of adopted over the past year, I think it all started with trying to help out with my mental health, but I would kind of drive out to a park. I would turn off the notifications on everything, and then read a paperback book. So like I'm in a space where there's not too much technology around me, right? And I kind of just focus on something that's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Less technology. I don't know what the adjective for that is, but yeah. I guess the point I'm trying to make is I feel like in today's world, it's something that you kind of need to force on yourself. With adults, I think that is doable. I'm so worried about children. When you're younger, you don't have the ability to control all of that. And as a kid, when you're in a position where you get to choose between playing video games or going out and playing with your friends versus staying home and doing homework. Yeah. All the kids are kind of leaning towards the fun stuff, right? So for me, I feel like companies should have certain things in there that prevent kids from being so engaged with technology.
That makes sense. So we've taken a quick look at where wearable technology kind of came from, where it's been, where some people thought it would go into the future.
So before moving on, Phil, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good. See you soon, everyone.
Back.
We are back.
Yes, we are.
So in the first half, we introduced wearables. We talked about where we became familiar with the idea of wearables and how that has evolved over time into where we are today with wearables. With that said, if you haven't been with us, every episode in this mini-series, one of us comes up with a set of guidelines, and both of us try to come up with our own version of what we see the future of this episode's topic. So for today's CaʒCon workshop, Casey and I were tasked with creating our own interpretation of where we see the future of wearables going.
The CaʒCon workshop.
So for this CaʒCon workshop, there are a couple of assumptions that we made in order to kind of allow us to be a little bit more creative, were the idea that 5G, IoT, pretty much data transfer speeds were not going to be a boundary for our wearable technology. The other item that would not be a boundary for our wearable technology would be batteries. Each of our wearable technology would still have a battery, so that would be something that we would think about, but we wouldn't be limited to today's versions of batteries, just that our wearable would need a power source. We do want to try to create a wearable that would exist in 10 to 30 years from now, so something that would probably exist in 2030 to 2050. So with that said, what was the wearable concept that you created, Keishi?
So as I mentioned in the first half, or I guess I've kind of mentioned this throughout our series here, but running is a hobby that I enjoy. So in the first half, I touched upon a few companies out there that are creating wearables that help out individuals with visual impairments. One of them being Wearworks, the company that created a monitor or sensor that enables a visually impaired runner to kind of gauge where they are. So with my design, I continue to focus on the concept of running, but more so focused on my personal experiences with running and what it is that I'm trying to get out of my running experience. So with running, I think there are different stages of runners. Certain runners that I run to become faster. In high school, I was in cross country, so that was kind of my focus. But as I kind of grew up, I realized that I couldn't run as fast. So my focus in running kind of transitioned over to the overall experience of what I get out of my running. And these days, it's more so about meditation and my time for reflection on my life and what it is that I'm doing. Because of that, when I'm running, I want to feel as if I'm kind of being free. So I don't know if this is a reference that a lot of people can understand, but if I refer to it in a pop culture reference, you know, when Forrest Gump, when he goes out and runs across the United States, there's a scene in there where an interviewer asks him, "Why are you running, Forrest?" And he just says, because he just wants to run, right?
Why are you doing this?
I just felt like running.
That's a type of high, what you guys know as the runner's high experience that I want to be engaged in. And with the current state of the running experience, wearables like smartwatches, it does help us monitor our pace as well as some of our key body metrics. But one thing I do kind of dislike is having to look down at my smartwatch every time I'm trying to track my speed. When I was looking at some of the wearable technologies that are in development, one of the items that kind of piqued my interest was the smart eye contacts. So these are items that you would kind of put in your eye. And with my design, what I want to achieve is having these eye contacts display in your eye the usual metrics like your pacing, your mileage, and then, for example, a distance to your next water break or things like that. That might help you figure out your experience. And the reason why I kind of focus on the eye contacts, for me personally, growing up with glasses, I was never a fan of wearing glasses when I'm running. First of all, it kind of moves up and down depending on your fit. And also when you're running in the rain, it does fog up your vision as well. So that's why I kind of focused on the contacts. And then the other benefits, it would include it being lightweight. And then also with glasses, it kind of has to fit your face type, right? And, the design does kind of influence how you look in it. So I figured contacts, that's not much of an issue. That's why I wanted to build something that would bring back our running experience to its core, which is just you running without many distractions. Now, with that said, if you have something in your eye all the time, like the scatter from Dragon Ball Z.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000!
With those, there's always that metrics that's constantly on. I know that can be distracting as well. So I don't know how we would do this technology-wise, but it would be something where you can turn on and off depending on your needs. So these smart eye contacts that are in development, oftentimes they have microchips in it. I don't know if that's linked to an app on your phone or what it is, but it would be something that you can turn on and off. So that is what I have in mind. Now, with that said, I feel like there are a lot of things that needs to be considered in developing something like this. First of all, not everybody is comfortable with putting things in their eye. So that's one hurdle that I guess you would need to go through. But there are smart glasses in development as well. So if you like glasses, you can wear, or sunglasses, you can wear those. If you're like myself, and if you prefer contacts over glasses or sunglasses, you have this option as well. And then also with myself, let me step back a little bit. So with running, there's different types of running. So there's the short runs that you kind of do on a daily basis just to keep your cardio up. And then there's what they call a LSD, long, slow distance. So you basically run for a long distance, but at a slower pace. And this is one of the trainings that you go through when you're doing marathon training. With those runs, when you're out there for a long period of time, sometimes you do feel like you need music to kind of boost your energy.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you would link music if you're just wearing these smart eye contacts. Maybe it's the microchip. It has the capability to store music in it, similar to the way you can store music on your smartwatch, so you don't have to carry your phone with you. If that is achievable, I think you can still recreate that experience. And then there's also safety issues. I mentioned earlier they can turn it on and off, but if you have something in your eye constantly when you're out running at night, that could be a hazard. So that's something to take into consideration.
So would you be able to create a faux night vision with the contacts?
That would be cool, but I don't feel night vision is the best for running. Unless you're in the countryside, you have no lights out there to help you navigate through your
because of all
trail.
the cars that would just blind you if they
yeah
that makes sense.
And then there's also issue with prescriptions. So I have pretty bad eyesight, but depending on your prescription level, I think certain contacts will be a little bit more pricey. And then with the concept of prescriptions and then sustainability, a large portion of the population that use contacts prefer soft contacts that you can throw away after a day or two. But with these smart eye contacts, I'm assuming with a microchip, there's a lot of money invested in each one. So it has to be something that is reusable, and oftentimes reusable contacts are hard contacts. So it's not as friendly to the eye. So I don't know how that would all work. So that would definitely be something that needs to be taken into consideration. So sustainability, the experience put it in your eye, as well as pricing. So in the beginning, I think pricing will be pretty high, but once it becomes available to the masses, I'm assuming prices will come down where it would be as expensive as a regular contacts.
Sorry, I don't know if you mentioned this already, but did you mention kind of whether or not this is something that someone would wear specifically just for running, or would they also wear it kind of in their normal day-to-day, or even if they weren't runners, they're people who got out for walking, if this would benefit them at all?
With my design, I was thinking of it being similar to apps on your phones, a feature to your smart eye contacts. So this is a world where people are constantly wearing smart eye contacts to kind of see, to begin with. Then if you download this feature, you would be able to turn it on and off as needed.
So in terms of like the on and off, that commands, is that all through the phone, or is that?
In my mind, when I was imagining it, I was thinking of being able to turn it off on an external
Device.
Yeah, so maybe your smartwatch or your phone. So I think I know where you're going to go with this. So when do you turn it on and off if you're going out and running without anything in your hand? I think there are some logistics that I need to work through here, but ideally you would, I guess, kind of turn it on before you go out and run. Go out there, run freely, come back and turn it off.
No, that makes sense. Sorry, go ahead.
That's right. And I can totally see a Black Mirror episode on that feature not being able to be turned off and impacting your life. But
yeah, I think with any type of item that you're adding to your body, there's always risk, right? I'm curious to kind of look into the smart contacts, because it does seem like it's something that's being researched already and they have all of these ideas. So kind of like it'd be very, very beneficial for you to have something outside of like just your watch. Because yeah, I don't know for you, but for me, when I run with my Fitbit, one of the things that I like to check a lot is the pace that I'm running at. And either it's on the wrong face, so it doesn't show the pace, or maybe I want to check the time. The time is so tiny on it. It's really annoying checking all of these things while running. So having a contact that has all of this is, I can definitely see the benefit in that.
Yeah, and for context, there are, as of this recording, a few companies out there that are leaders in this field, not with the running, but with the smart eye contacts. One of them being Mojo Lens. So I think they're building what I have in mind personally with this design. I saw on their website that they were the winner in the NASA iTech 2020 award, something like that. So they have been recognized publicly for their achievement, but they're building something where the microchip and the eye contacts display certain information that you program it. So I don't know, it could be notifications when you receive a text, or it could be the text itself. I don't know. Well, I don't think they've disclosed what they would be displaying. So, I mean, the guidelines that we put in place is 30 years, right?
10 to 30 years, yeah.
Yeah, so minimum 2030, which is like 10 years from now. So given the stage of development that we are in as of 2020, I do feel like by 2030 and beyond, smart eye contacts will definitely be part of our day-to-day, if you prefer contacts.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about, just kind of stretching out within that timeline of 30 years from now, that technology will, or it's like projected to be in a place where they can accommodate smart contacts. Because I think even smart glasses, it seems like something so far away, which it's interesting that you and I both came to the idea that our wearable had to be something that is associated with our eyes. In your case, it's contacts, but in my case, I went to smart glasses. So my central theme is to get rid of the smartphone as we know it, right? But one of the reasons I wanted to get away from the wristwatch was because although the wristwatch was very enticing because it is an existing product, it's been so heavily part of our past. I saw the problem of a lot of people like still looking down at their wrist and kind of like having back problems. Otherwise, they're just kind of like going like this the whole time, or like having their arms up. That, along with some other reasons that we'll talk about, some of the reasons that I moved more towards kind of like a glasses concept. Although this might take a little while, the target is to have them fit at max the form factor of the Ray-Ban Wayfarer glasses. So I think that's like a very classic style that people know. And if your preference is for like thinner rims glasses, that's fine. But that'd be very difficult to place a lot of modules. Like technologically kind of saying, you can't really hide anything in a thin rim glass. So that's why I kind of picked the Wayfarer as kind of like a stylishly acceptable kind of general glass frame that you could really wear with anything, and it's kind of timeless. And then some of the key features of it are the fact that you are going to have cameras and sensors coming out the front that may be a little bit visible, like the Snap glasses. And they're quite visible still, but it's a lot more general design.
Okay.
The idea of the smart glasses is it's kind of like an AR, VR, like augmented reality, virtual reality combo glass. So the glass itself would have several different modes that you can place it in, one of them being kind of like a theater mode, where your glasses become like essentially shades, so dark they become like not transparent at all, and you'd get more or less like a theater experience.
Okay.
But the sensors on the front of your glasses would still recognize your hands. So if you move your hands up to a certain location, you'll see outlines of them. So you can more or less kind of like in the air press and command it to pause, play, fast forward, rewind. That you can.
So if you have any AMC stocks right now, you should sell them right now, because Phil is coming for AMC for the theater mode and the augmented reality modes here.
No, it's not that. So that's one of the items. Like theater mode is like a big thing. Sport mode, be for like music calls, on-screen health monitoring in like the bottom corner. Silent mode acts like normal glasses except for calls from like important people. And then focus mode. I wanted a focus mode, but I couldn't figure out what the focus mode was. I think this silent mode would still like receive calls. There's also the off-head mode of the glasses that I want to kind of dive into. Essentially, it's when it detects that you are not wearing the glasses. So when would you use this? If you wanted to take a selfie, right? Or like a picture of a person, what would happen is you would go into the camera mode inside of your augmented reality glasses, and you'd select like the selfie mode, which in modern phones is kind of like a camera with a rotating glass. But obviously you wouldn't be able to rotate the camera because it'd be on your head. So what you do is you take your glasses off, you put it in a certain place. There is like an outside portion of the glasses that now act as like a viewfinder. So you could see whatever is on, albeit at this really small area, but you could see kind of what the glasses cameras are pointing at. Additionally, this off the head ability also allows different situations where maybe you're sleeping and you get a notification. You could kind of like quick peek at what the notification is before putting your glasses on. Augmented reality obviously is going to be a big thing. Then with like the augmented reality, there's going to be like the UI. The UI that I would like to have in place is similar to kind of what HoloLens, if you've ever looked at the Microsoft HoloLens project, and a mix of Oculus's UI and also possibly a mix of kind of like Minority Report, where you can see Tom Cruise just playing with the screens in front of him.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, if you look at the HoloLens 2 product, what it does is it recognizes your hands and your arms. And because it recognizes your hands, arms, it also recognizes your interactions with other items in the room. But also, if you've ever played with like a Windows operating system, you're very familiar with the start menu. And what the Microsoft HoloLens 2 user interface does is it pretty much puts that start menu on your wrist.
Okay.
So you could be interacting with a desktop in front of you, but if you ever wanted to bring up a menu of items, you would either bring up your wrist or you look down at your wrist, and then you'd press your wrist and it'd bring up the start menu. So I thought that idea was really cool, because one of the things that I think is beneficial about smartphones today is the ability to be what you might think as really discreet with your actions. I think one of the things that a lot of us are scared of when looking at smart glasses or wearables associated with the eyes is the idea that, like in Minority Report, you're going to be playing with that screen, but no one else knows that you're playing with the screen, so you look kind of funny. And so with the idea that you can look down and essentially use your wrist as a start menu, I kind of wanted to extend that to the idea that if you can look down at your hand, there is a gesture that more or less makes your hand into a smartphone, so you can do things a lot more discreetly. So one of the things that I still kind of have a problem with is you're either bringing your hand up to perform an action or you're looking down to perform an action. But I think because of that, there's value in how discreet that is. Unfortunately, like in class, you could just look at your phone without anybody really understanding what you're doing outside of the fact that you're not paying attention. So you could type messages, you can scroll on the internet, all of those items you can do without pretty much anybody else in your surroundings knowing or doing. So I think there's value in being able to really have that control over some kind of user interface within the small area of your hand, in like a one-handed motion, or even just like in the thumb motion.
So I have two questions.
Yes.
So when you say like your smartwatch, so everything's just being displayed on your glasses, but your hand, are you doing like a thumb motion that you use with your smart?
Yeah, so your glasses will project more or less kind of like a virtual menu or a virtual keyboard on your hand. And so with that said, you can move around the keyboard like your palm, but you're putting a motion of like a keyboard on the screen, right? But if you're doing that, there's only probably 5 or so keys that you can hit, right? So imagine trying to type a whole message with just 5 or so keys, or like half a keyboard. So the idea is that you have like the whole keyboard on your palm, like the first generation iPhone where you can press the whole screen with just your thumb.
Okay.
So I think the typing portion would be kind of contained there, and the ability to scroll around different screens, different functions within the smart glass user interface would still be there. Obviously, if you're by yourself, or if you're not ashamed of having your hands up and moving screens around, or like interacting with the screen Tony Stark style or Minority Report style, you're in an area where it doesn't bother you, or it just doesn't bother you as a whole, you can still do that. But if you do want the discreteness, the idea is that you keep your hand more or less in the field of view of your smart glasses, so that you can discreetly do things as well.
That's pretty cool. Never really thought about that. So you could either be looking like you're miming the public, or I don't know, doing this with your thumb.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's just playing a thumb war with an imaginary screen.
So my next question is, I don't know if you mentioned this, but how does it track where your finger placements are? Do you wear gloves?
No. So depth is something that it more or less kind of recognizes, because there's going to be more than one camera, right? So the depth of where your hand is in reference to the camera is recognized, similar to how your eyes recognize kind of the depth of your hand. So a mix of like AI and like camera depth perception is going to be there. There's sensors called time of flight sensors that they have on like Samsung phones as well, that are better at interpreting depth. But I think just the basic camera use is fine for that. So your smart glasses can project a keyboard in your augmented view. The idea is that the smart glasses do recognize your hand, so it recognizes all of the gestures that your hands are doing, all the gestures that your fingers are doing, and then how that reacts with anything that it places in front of you. So there, obviously, there's going to be some getting used to, because you don't have any haptic feedback.
So how would you switch between the modes? Is it a button on the glasses, or is that also leveraging the projection keyboard?
My idea is that it's leveraging a button on the glasses. So I didn't put it here, but the idea is that you'd have physical buttons, like a few on each temple. On the left side, you'd have your volume up, down, play, pause, a separate button, and then a picture button. And then on the right side, you'd have like a power standby button, and then like a fully custom physical button. And then on that same side, you'd have the like mode select. If you have like a Dyson vacuum cleaner, you can change the suction power through like several different modes. So yeah, you'd still have like the physical switches there. It'd be smaller. The different modes you would actually probably need for your glasses first off, especially because you're dealing with vision, right? And when you're doing activities like driving, you do not want notifications or any type of distraction, more or less depending on what the activity is. So you could probably put like a driving mode in there as well. I think these are like the main modes that you want. So you can, in driving mode will probably be like a silent mode you can use. So outside of that, right, bone conduction audio is something I didn't want like an in-ear audio, because I think bone conduction allows you to be aware of the surrounding a little bit better. But one of the enablers of theater mode is the fact that the glasses are fully transitionable from completely clear to fully blackout. The other thing I wanted to make sure is that it was modular. So like your temples and your lenses and your frame, like the front part of your frames, each of them can be removed and upgraded for items later on. What that allows for is just kind of sustainability, in the sense that you really don't need to upgrade unless you really want to. So the technology will be continuously updated, but because you have the same form factor, the idea is that if you want to upgrade later on more memory, more storage, you can always kind of remove the applicable portion of it and trade it in, or trade someone else who has the type of add-on that you want.
Okay.
If you want a higher quality camera, you could just trade it in for a newer one, or if a newer camera comes out, you trade it in for that one. It allows for kind of like the company itself to get the old one, open it up, maybe recycle some of the components, put some new components in, and then resell that, or sell kind of like refurbished at a lower price for consumers to get them into the market.
Okay.
One thing I also wanted to do is create a standard. So in order to make it accommodatable to like the masses to a certain extent, I did want to more or less kind of like publish a standard with the glasses, so that lens manufacturers would be able to kind of have guidelines how to manufacture their lenses, like work with the lens manufacturers so that they can incorporate lenses, or be easier to create lenses that can be used with the glasses.
So you can have Gucci versions of the glasses.
But yeah, Gucci versions of the glasses. Obviously, again, you need special lenses to kind of interpret the augmentation properly. But yeah, the idea is that you have Gucci versions of it, you have any kind of designer version of it, and then like the lenses would be exchangeable, so you can go to more or less any lens manufacturer, or like your Costco lenses or your local optometrist, and they'd be able to order lenses from wherever they get the lenses for that glasses for the frame manufacturers, and it'd be easy to find the lenses that would fit, that would accommodate these type of frames and the technology.
One thing that I would always do wonder with wearables, especially when you had to put it on your head. I don't know if you know this designer, but there's a designer by the name of Hiroto Ikeuchu. He designs CG cyberpunk wearables, but it has like this industrial look where it's like overly exaggerated. It's really heavy. So it kind of looks cool visually, but it seems kind of heavy and kind of strangeful on your neck. And then all his photos, it's always like these really skinned girls wearing it. I'm kind of always imagining them having really, really thick necks to support. Otherwise, I don't know if you'd be able to wear them for a long period of time. Even with these headphones that I'm wearing right now, if I wear for a long period of time, or if I fall asleep in it, when I wake up, I feel strain on my neck. So to go back to your glasses idea, so I was wondering how heavy your glasses would be.
Yeah, so I think the target is like your Ray-Ban Wayfarers. It's not the thinnest set of frames in existence, obviously. And I think what that allows is like 10 to 20 to 30 years down the line that the technology has become so small. Even with the Wayfarers, you probably might need to switch up to something like a carbon fiber. If you take a cross section of any of the frame materials, it's a dense piece, but with 3D printing as it is right now, you could probably create a more porous material. Or even with technologies in manufacturing right now, you can make a more porous material that would be lighter to make up for any of the technology that you do build in.
Okay. Definitely like the design and the concept, but I have, I guess, one question. What about people who don't prefer wearing glasses or sunglasses?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be with any product, right? It's like with autonomous cars, people who don't prefer driving, right? They can take public transportation. So this will be one of many avenues that are available as an alternative to a smartphone.
Oh, okay. I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is always figuring out how much market share you can get. So like, aren't you losing like, I don't know, 30, 40, 50% potential market share? But then I kind of go back to the concept of the population and adoption of new technology. If you get the right people using this technology, I'm pretty sure everybody will kind of catch on.
Yeah. And I think also what's interesting is I feel like it is more, so smart glasses have been attempted at use in manufacturing and office settings more so than like consumer settings. So I think that's really a market where a lot of people see some value. I mentioned the augmented reality projection board, keyboard, whatnot, right?
Can you imagine seeing somebody working with the glasses on? It's kind of funny though, because you're just like, it'll be funny at first seeing somebody at Starbucks using it, but then similar to AirPods, people will just catch on.
More so than seeming funny, I feel like a lot of it will be how convenient is it really? Because imagine you not having to bring your laptop around.
Yeah, that's the part that I love.
Right?
I hate carrying stuff with me.
Yeah, so how many things can you minimize by just kind of being able to wear them on your head?
Yeah.
Right? Like the idea that people kind of having to hunch because of ergonomics with the computer screens is like a thing of the past, right?
I see.
Obviously, from the augmented reality point of view, it's all tuned to your own vision. But yeah, obviously any pros and cons of like wearing glasses is going to be the same for any smart glasses, right?
Yeah. So one last question. People like myself who don't have great eyesight that may not prefer to wear contacts, have you thought about how that would work?
So there's a couple ways I go about it. One of them would be like a physical adjustment dial to tune the items that are augmented on the screen, similar to kind of like how I think a lot of VR glasses are.
They do have that?
Yeah, I think a lot of VR glasses, augmented reality glasses that exist in today's world, they have like a dial to do minor adjustments to the picture so that
I didn't know that.
focus. Yeah, so that was one of the ideas that I was thinking of. But yeah, I wanted to make something that was still easy to use, but it didn't cause any harm to the user over time.
I like it. I think it's really cool. The different modes, I think that's what I like the best. Now, I was reading about SpaceX, and like I said earlier, a lot of these companies are moving towards screens and touch screens, right? But with the Falcon, with that model, majority of the functions are done through the touch screens, but the core functions that impact the overall operation of the shuttle are still done through the buttons. With touch screens, you can accidentally touch multiple things or do something unintended. So, I was just thinking with your glasses, changing modes would fall into the core functions.
Yeah.
Or core features, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so you should keep that tactile, and I think else would be the projection keyboard.
Yeah.
I want to try that out.
Yeah. That's the summary of my wearables. And like I said, it's pretty interesting how both of us came up with ideas that are associated with kind of like adding interfaces directly to our eyes to eliminate like looking down or being in any state where we are not focused on kind of like what's in front of us. But with that said, I am curious to like the listeners of today's podcast, what they would create if they would see their wearable be something associated with the eyes, or what types of devices do the listeners think would exist in the future? What do they think would be a more beneficial use of wearables that may not exist today? That's what I'd like to ask the listeners if they could comment on.
Sure. So as usual, you guys can always hit us up on our social media, starting off with casualcontemplationpodcast.wordpress.com.
Yep. And you'll be also able to find us on Instagram at
Casual Contemplation Podcast.
all one word.
All one word. We put our promos on there as well, so please check that out.
And for our WordPress, we'll put references that we mentioned in the podcast, but be on the lookout also for just any other blog posts or any other announcements that we might have. You'll also be able to find all of our episodes up on the blog, so feel free to check that out.
Yeah, we have a lot of ideas that we want to get out to the world, so hopefully we'll have things on there beyond our podcast content, so please make sure to follow.
And if you have any ideas of what you want us to talk about, Casey and I, please feel free to share that as well. We're always looking for more input from our listeners.
Definitely.
All right. Until then, peace.
Peace.